Global waste management has predominantly become a major challenge in the past 100 years, after the industrialization of the mass production of consumer goods, infrastructural material, and electronics. The first adequate global comprehensive waste management strategy was released by the United Nations Environmental Program in 2015, called the Global Waste Management Outlook. It is the world's first waste management strategy compiled by international bodies to address global issues of waste management challenges and opportunities with in-depth and objective research on waste production and management trends across the globe. Over the course of 6 major chapters, trends, policy analysis, government strategies, and financial incentives are provided for more sustainable and responsible waste management. The argument presented in UNEP's Global Waste Management Outlook is that waste management is not only a need, but a basic human right, lest otherwise the accumulation of massive quantities of global waste pose significant threats to human and environmental health. However, waste typically receives less attention than other municipal utility services like water, transportation, or electricity. This is particularly the case in rural areas in comparison to urban areas, namely in developing countries. Joseph Onjala, Senior Research Fellow at the University of Nairobi, explores relationships between patterns of urbanization and economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa, an area of the world which is quickly urbanizing and experiencing immense population growth. Though the exact reasons for urbanization in sub-Saharan Africa are not as thoroughly researched, Onjala explores the urban bias theory, which states that national governments will pay more attention to higher economic output areas, like cities, in terms of the delivery of utilities and services, as well as investment and policy. Since the national government is providing more and higher quality services like waste management, water, or electricity to these urban areas, people in areas which may be labeled as more rural settings may flock to these urban areas attempting to achieve a higher standard of living as provided by the federal government, at least in the provision of municipal utilities. Most academic literature on waste generation or international reports on waste management strategies deal with the economic incentives, policy tools, or financial instruments which either affect waste generation per capita or can be used to slow down the rate of waste production. However, less attention in these reports or strategic plans generated by public institutions from the municipal to the international level focus on the cultural aspect of disposal and altering perceptions of material accumulation from a societal standpoint in their ties to an assumed status symbol in the majority of Western cultures. Few anthropologists, social scientists, or psychologists are involved in the waste management strategies developed by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, or any international or federal institutions which attempt to tackle the issue of waste and pollution. And, though top-down approaches from public institutions may be met with resistance in changing the way the perceptions of a throwaway society are formed by those participating, there still lies the possibility of potentially collaborating with private institutions, say through Global Waste Management Outlook alliances, in developing marketing strategies to the general public, in shifting the view away from the generally agreed upon and somewhat biologically based, attitude that the vast accumulation of stuff and things is equivalent to success. Consider a scenario where you come home and you find that you've left the kitchen sink running, which is now overflowing onto the kitchen floor. The first thing you would do is not go grab some towels from the linen closet. The first thing you would do is turn the sink off. The same philosophy should be applied to our global waste problem. The first thing consumers can do to slow down the flow of plastics through the economic function and into the world's landfills, waterways, oceans, and terrestrial environments is to cease creating demand for the manufacturing of them in the first place. Every purchase at the checkout counter is a vote, which creates demand for how products are made, where they were made, and which companies made them. However, though this may prove to be an effective bottom-up strategic action plan employed by the individual consumer, solutions should not exclusively involve bottom-up approaches. Top-down approaches such as those already outlined are also required for collaborative, deliberative, regional processes to decision-making at every level. Entering into more regional, smaller, micro-contracts with one another has proven to be the most effective means of governing common resources, which may give rise to the question of whether or not, say, plastics themselves may be treated as a common resource. Sustainable consumption practices employed by both the consumer and the strategic action plans which coincide with the philosophy at the producer level aims towards zero waste, a concept which self-evidently targets producing no unwanted waste after the consumption stage of a good's life cycle has been completed. Preventing unwanted plastic waste starts with not consuming it in the first place, the first R in the popular yet unevenly communicated acronym. Beyond the consumer, achieving zero waste also means policy implemented which encourages more efficient resource extraction, better design, the use of more green materials, redesigning organizational structure, greening the supply chain, and better technology in the manufacturing of goods. Here, technological improvements will play a significant role in transforming overconsumptive or overproductive behavior into sustainable consumption loops which become a part of the circular economy to achieve a steady throughput. Resource extraction, in this scenario, will be redirected to extract resources from existing waste or resources which are already in economic circulation, and to avoid the virgin extraction of additional natural capital. After the resources have been sourced for manufacturing, their design must include easy disassembly and material durability, that the products may last longer than traditional single-use plastics, and also be repairable if the component of the good should break. From the consumer end, reduction in demand is still the most exemplary form of sustainable consumption in which one may engage. But in the absence of reduction, these are additional private industry policy measures which may be taken to increase the degree to which production and consumption may be considered sustainable, in contrast to the traditional linear economic function in which the economy has traditionally been modeled, at least since the Industrial Revolution. Consumers care now more than ever about the environmental and social impact of the products they buy, and increasingly competitive organizations are incorporating green business strategies in order to capitalize on this growing demand. According to a report published earlier this year, in the past 5 years, 55% of consumers across 60 countries were willing to pay higher prices for goods from environmentally conscious companies. 71% of Americans at least consider the environment as a factor when shopping. However, it's not just the consumer aspect that makes green industry or green business strategies so attractive. By its very nature, green business is intended to do more with less. So, in addition to the added value of going green in the eyes of consumers, organizations may also experience enormous savings on investment from reduced energy costs, waste management costs, heating and cooling costs, material costs, water costs, and human resource costs as a result of higher efficiencies throughout the chain of production of goods and services. From an investor's standpoint, for example, renewable energy sources for power or heating and cooling your organization, such as wind, solar, hydro, or geothermal power, have resulted in significantly more sustainable and low-carbon means of production across the board. Just like residential homeowners, businesses can now offset their usage and costs by implementing renewable methods, like solar paneling, through the use of what are called feed-in tariffs, a mechanism designed to financially incentivize the use of renewables, where the municipal government will pay you or your business for electricity you sell back to the grid. Contrastingly, the production of waste has long been held in the public eye as the complete opposite of environmental responsibility. And this does not just apply to garbage or municipal solid waste, but inefficiencies in other sectors like energy, products, supplies, or food. For example, globally speaking, up to half of all food grown on Earth is not consumed and becomes a waste product. Another downside of food production inefficiencies is the buildup and release of greenhouse gases from its decomposition, including methane, a gas which is 23 times more potent at producing the greenhouse effect than carbon dioxide. So today, many restaurants, grocery stores, and food producers are cutting back on waste by donating their leftover food to homeless shelters and food banks. At the same time, grocery stores are increasingly revisiting and altering their business models to reduce food waste, including the reduction of food packaging and plastics, which have now resulted in new opportunities such as recipe-based food delivery services straight to the consumer's door. Along the same line of waste reduction and energy efficiency in homeowner and residential applications, green business trends toward energy efficiency are experiencing enormous growth in the sustainable infrastructure or green building marketplaces. Existing construction companies that have knowledge of more sustainably sourced materials, building design, or spatial and/or energy efficiency are now beginning to offer eco-friendly options that homeowners prefer. Though very simple and often unnoticeable switches, the energy and water savings in a household can be hugely affected by eco-friendly products like tankless water heaters, solar paneling, and insulated windows or window film, building direction, passive heating and cooling, smart insulation, and low-flow water appliances. Even in the manipulation of information and computer-based work, the global trend in decentralized and remote project-based work can help a company reduce their overall ecological footprint. With the reduction of dozens of employees having to commute to a single brick-and-mortar building, the company can reduce the carbon emissions its employees would have emitted on the way to or from work, as well as the added benefit of a potentially happier and more productive employee. In the longer-term future, moving forward, green business trends are expected to continue to develop with a focus on carbon recycling, green infrastructure, microgrids, the circular economy, and the business-to-business sharing economy. Progressively, these elements of eco-friendly business practices are becoming more of an opportunity for reducing risks and increasing revenue, opening the door for mainstream investors to finance sustainable business growth. It is important to note that access to information and participation in the knowledge economy is often much easier in more developed nations. To encourage a true democratic process of the co-creation of knowledge, information flows that are disseminated from more developed nations toward less developed states must not act as a crutch. This is not to contradict previous arguments toward exemplifying post-plastics behavior and influencing others to do the same. But information, like money, is a resource. Even disregarding the aforementioned risks associated with the potential predatory targeting of new populations joining digital networks in more remote parts of the globe, there still exists the possibility to distribute information in a fashion similar to global aid. The majority of aid efforts worldwide have been time and time again shown to be ineffective in the long-term development of skills building and establishing a community-driven knowledge base, which can sustain itself after the aid effort has been removed from the region. Thus, the distinction here is to act and inspire other nations to break from plastics path dependency, to ensure that information flows are in fact directed toward developing communities, not simply aiding them. It is important that they carry actionable steps and skill-building content, including information generated by the public, in order to allow autonomous participation in the global knowledge economy, and eventually be able to direct information flows back toward their original sources. Organizations developing collaborative and competitive strategies for agreed-upon action must engage in a series of debates, the challenging of ideas, the reconfiguration of what is known, or the rearrangement of organizational structure. Only then, after ideas have been tested, contested, and proven to work to solve context-specific issues, can they be rewarded by gaining a growing following of active digital network participants to spur a movement. For each contributor to the growing digital global knowledge economy, it then becomes necessary as a responsibility to assume to share information that encourages debate and pass along knowledge content that challenges, inspires, and broadens the mind, while encouraging cooperation simultaneously. Global green business opportunities have resulted as an issue of fossil fuel economics, climate change, ecological impact, economic inefficiencies, the justification of addictive behavior, the promotion of a throwaway society, consumerism, and a fundamental societal flaw of instantly gratifying consumption to benefit the self at the expense of the global environment. In fact, I would challenge each and every one of you to go 30 minutes outside in a town without seeing a piece of litter on the street. And I hope that when you do, you're a fraction as outraged as I am.